Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 624, and today's date is March 24th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The U.S. Government Continually Manipulates the Economy to Keep the Illusion of a Recovery. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand there are many countries protesting. We understand that the people in these countries that are protesting, they're sick and tired of austerity. I mean, we see thousands in Montreal. They have unite against austerity and the petro economy. We see it happening in countries in Europe. We see in Cyprus right now the anniversary of the bail-ins. The Cypriot people were out there and they were stoning the Bank of Cyprus, because you have to remember, during that period of time, the Cypriot people went to sleep on Friday, they woke up on Saturday, and all of a sudden capital controls were in effect. They couldn't get their money out, and the government, the central bankers, were telling them that they're going to have to take some of their hard-earned money, currency, and they will give them the bank stock because the banks are insolvent. Well, what is the bank stocks going to do? Pretty much nothing. And they told them at that point in time that they were only going to take about 8 to 10%. And it turned out on average they took 47%. And the capital controls were in effect for a very long time, over a year. They couldn't transfer any money out of the country. They couldn't take out their currency. And a lot of businesses, a lot of people suffered and are continually suffering as of today. Things have not just automatically improved. When people, or I should say the central bank comes in and, or the government comes in and takes your hard-earned money, almost half of it, you just can't bounce back because this affected a lot of different things. And we're seeing this throughout Europe, that all these countries that are working with austerity, they're finding it very difficult to survive. And as time goes on, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. And this is why all these countries are protesting, saying enough is enough. Here in the United States, there's a different story going on right here. They're continually pushing the illusion that we're in this recovery. And doing this report that I'm doing is showing people that things are breaking down every single day. And I know there's people out there saying, well, look, in this area things are fine. Well, it doesn't happen in every single area all at the same time. It spreads very slowly. And we can see that manufacturing is down. It's declining. We see the Baltic Dry Index at its lowest point in a very, very long time. It's actually more than half, 3 times less than it was last year. And that shows us that people aren't taking their disposable income, going out and buying goods. And if they're not buying goods, the factories do not have to produce anything. And if the factories don't have to produce anything, they don't need the raw materials. And we see that the Richmond Fed Manufacturing Survey has completely collapsed. I mean, it's at a 2-year low at this point. Printing at a disastrous -8, they were expecting a +3. Richmond Fed is the lowest since January of 2013. The last 5 months have seen the index drop at its fastest rate since Lehman. So what we're looking at is something where things are completely collapsing. Yes, at certain times they bump up, but the downward trend is there, and it's continuing. They're continually telling us that no, prices are not rising, everything is falling. Gas prices have come down quite a bit. They're ticking up right now. They're starting to move up a little bit here. And you would think because gas prices have come down, food would drop and other things would fall, but we're seeing that no, consumer prices rose by 0.2%. The most since May of 2014. And when we look at this, the food index increased by 0.2% in February. The index for non-alcoholic beverages increased by 0.6% in February. It's the largest since September of 2012. The index for beef and veal rose by 0.7%. Its 13th consecutive increase. Fresh fruits increased by 0.6%. We are seeing inflation on items that you need every single day. Yes, are they suppressing gas? Yes, they are. But we see that the numbers now are ticking up. They're trying to convince us that real estate is in a complete recovery. Even though we see mortgage applications declining, we see people being laid off in the mortgage departments. And right now, the United States government central bankers have come out with their new statistics. And they're kind of ridiculous. Because what they're trying to tell us during the same time that housing starts and existing home sales completely missed all their expectations and they're declining. And of course they blame that on the bad weather. The Census Bureau moments ago released a stunner of new home sales numbers, which supposedly rose from an upward revised 500,000 to 539,000, smashing the expectations of only 481,000, and this was during the bad weather period. So this is a 25% spike from a year ago and up 7.8% from January. But when we look at this, we see that, what they do is they give us these manipulated numbers right now, trying to convince us that real estate is on the rise, and then they go back and they manipulate the numbers and they revise them downward when no one's paying attention. The census always admits in the fine print that 90% of confidence interval on the 7.8 increase is plus or minus 15.2%. And we continually see them downward revise the data for the 6 months in a row. And when we look at the graphs and we look at everything, we see, yes, they go back. For example, May of 2014, they told us that, the sales were up at 504. They revised them down to 458. They told us back in August of 2014, the sales were up and they were at 504,000. Then they revised it down to 448,000. And this is continually ongoing because they're trying to convince everything that everything is okay. The new home sales in February in the Northeast rose from 17,000 to 43,000 during the bad weather period. That's an increase of 153%. Does that make any sense? So I decided, because people are trying to convince me that no, real estate is doing well. And I have to go back once again to 2007, 2008. When I was trying to sell my house, I lived in New York. And all of a sudden the traffic just completely dried up. Nobody knew what was going on. What is happening here? And I spoke to my sister-in-law that was in real estate. And I said, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Because in the last 6 months, there is no traffic to the houses. Prior to that, there was tons of people. All of a sudden, nothing is going on. And I see house prices starting to drop. And my sister-in-law in Florida said, no, oh my God, everything's booming here. I can't believe it. We're writing contracts left and right. People are bidding up. It's crazy. Well, guess what happened? 8 to 9 months later, all of a sudden, in Florida, things came to a screeching halt. Now, things do not happen all at once. That would be incredible if it did. But what happens is it starts in certain areas, and then it spreads a little bit further. Because what's happening is the U.S. government central bankers are in these areas, keeping the bubble going. They can't go into every single area. It's quite impossible. So we see areas start to decline. So I went out. You can go on Zillow, you can go on Realtor.com, all these different sites. And I said, let me just take a look. And I'm not just going to give you one example. I'm going to give you many. Just to show you. And I'll give you the dates of these homes. In New York, this is Upper Westchester County. On September 18, 2014, this house was listed at $777,000. November 20th, 2014, if the real estate market is in recovery and people are just lining up to buy this house, we see a bidding war. We see the opposite. November 20th of 2014, we see them reduce their house by $50,000 to $727,000. In February 10th of 2014, 2015, I should say, the price was brought down to $717,000. Still no buyer. Another house, September 16th, 2014, $710,000. It was put up for sale. They decided to reduce the price on November 20th of 2014 to $625,000. Couple days after that, about a week or so after that, there was no traffic. They delisted. They brought it back on the market of this in March of 2015. They listed it at $625,000. March 13th of 2015, they brought it down to $599,000. In Florida, the south portion of Florida, we have a house that was listed on October 17th, 2014 at $878,000. February 5th of 2015 brought it down to $799,000. Another house in Southwest Florida, March 19th, 2015, they brought it on to the market, $799,000. March 23rd, 2015, this is like a week later, $759,000. They came down $40,000 already. California, LA, a $988,000 home was put on the market December 5th, 2014. They reduced prices in February of 2015 to $948. In March 13th of 2015 down to $865. What does this tell you? We're seeing things change all over the place. In LA once again, September 30th, 2014, $670,000 the house was put up for sale. December 2014 brought down to $660,000. March 14th, 2015 brought down to $600,000. It is spreading all around the country. Yes, you might be in that area where you see things are booming. But guess what? Eventually what's going to happen? Those places where you see them still booming, those are going to be hit the hardest. It might take 8 to 9 months, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, but it will spread. I see it all over the country. I'm keeping track of this. And it's the exact same thing that happened back in 2007 going into 2008. Now, the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank is saying that we are approaching the natural rate of employment. Now, I don't even know if there is a natural rate of employment, but they like to convince us that, yes, we are near that point. And if we are near that point, why do we see things completely falling apart? And the other question is, if we are reaching that natural point of unemployment, why do we see the people in the United States not having the ability to produce income to support their family, produce income to save their money, produce income to use it to purchase goods in retail stores? Why are we seeing a problem with this? Because what we're seeing right now, and this is coming out of Deutsche Bank, that 47% of American households save absolutely nothing. Nearly half of Americans aren't saving money. Now, why is this? Is it because they just don't want to? No, everyone wants to save money. Everyone wants to tuck something away for a rainy day or to go on a trip or to make a purchase of goods. I know I like to keep money in the bank, if not really in the bank, but I like to have savings if I can. But when things get tough and you just have enough money to purchase just to get through, that's all you do and no money goes into the bank. Now, why is this? Well, sometimes it's very difficult to find a high-paying job or a job at all. And I don't think that these corporate media types are getting the message out here that things are really, really bad. I mean, people right now are struggling. It's getting harder and harder for them just to make it. Now, let's look at this for a second. After the 2008, the big stock market crash, because that was the signal to let everyone know that we are having a problem, but the problem was existing before that. We see that the savings rate was higher in 2010. It shrunk a little bit in 11. 2012, it got worse. 2014, it even got worse. Now the question is, if all these people are employed, why is it getting worse? Why is retail getting worse? Why is real estate getting worse? So let's get this straight. Right now, the U.S. government, central bankers, are trying to convince us that we're in this fantastic recovery. Everything is just fine. That we have good, high-quality manufacturing jobs pouring back into the United States. But the Baltic Dry Index is continually falling. It's at its very, very low point. Manufacturers aren't producing. Retail are not buying more goods. Stores are closing. People are being laid off. They're continually telling us that there's no inflation, but food is continually going up. Obamacare prices are continually going up. This holiday season, when the unemployment was at its lowest, Black Friday was a complete flop. The holiday season was absolutely terrible. And during the holiday season, and right after the holiday season, stores reported that they're closing a lot of stores and laying off a lot of people, and some of them were going out of business. That doesn't make any sense. The housing market, they continually tell us that we're in a recovery. People are purchasing. Prices are going up. But no. Mortgage employees are being laid off. Mortgage applications are declining and prices are coming down. People are reducing their prices. New construction is falling as existing home sales are falling. Lumber prices are falling. Lumber sales are decreasing. So what part of the real estate industry is doing better? You mean the hedge funds, investment fund, purchasing homes in cash, the speculators that are trying to flip right now in those areas where the Fed stepped in, like Phoenix, parts of California, the South, the Midwest. But everywhere else we see it starting to creep up and starting to fall apart. Interest rates, they're keeping at 0%. Why would they keep them at 0 if everything is fine? Let them go up. There'd be no problem because, again, we're reaching that unemployment area where everything is in recovery mode. Why is the Fed so afraid to raise interest rates? Because they know if they bring them up, the real estate market completely dies. The auto industry dies. The economy collapses. The investors who are taking these short-term loans to invest in the market disappears. They won't do it because when they borrow $100,000, there's no interest attached, so they return the $100,000. The entire system would collapse. This is why they're not doing it. Now, there is a correction that I need to make, and we're starting to find out that HSBC, when we talked about them closing their gold vaults, actually what they are doing is they're just closing these safety deposit boxes of clients. The rumor about HSBC was completely incorrect. And we can see that HSBC is actually closing the safety deposit box facilities, some of which are involved in strong rooms in branches that have gold. The vaults are not specialist gold vaults, rather standard vaults or strong rooms which contain safety deposit box. These safety deposit boxes hold all sorts of valuables from legal documents, family heirlooms, artwork, jewelry, and of course bullion coins and bars. So I just want to make that correction before we go any further. Now, in Russia, we see they're making deals all over the place, and they just made another deal with Jordan. Jordan and Russia on Tuesday signed an intergovernmental agreement on cooperation in the construction of a nuclear plant. The would-be nuclear plant will satisfy Jordan's entire electricity demand and give a possibility to export electricity to other countries like Syria and Iraq. This project is seen as the biggest one in the entire history of Russian-Jordan relations. And we can see right now Russia, China, they're continually making deals all around the world. Now, I want to just be clear on one thing here. Just because the BRICS system, China and Russia are pushing this new currency, this new system, doesn't mean in the long run that this same thing that we're seeing now isn't going to happen. Because what happens as we go along, the system becomes corrupt, people get greedy, and we start seeing things that shouldn't be happening. Now, our founding fathers warned us here in the United States that, listen, we set up this system. It will not last forever, and one day you will have to fight for your freedom once again. And again, just because there's a new system doesn't mean it's going to last, because again, what happens? The bankers get in there, they infiltrate the system, they manipulate it, and they make it work for themselves, not for the people. Yes, they have very good intentions in the beginning where they're trying to help the people, but in the long run, it will not last. This is why the people must keep these government officials accountable for their actions. And when the governments decide to take more and more control away from the people, this is the signal that something is happening. When they pass legislation in the middle of the night when no one's looking, something is wrong. And this is why we need to change certain things. Our founding fathers here set up a system. Is it perfect? No. I think it needs to be tweaked. And we need to have other safeguards put into place. And I think this time will eventually come when the system starts crumbling and falling apart right in front of our faces. I mean, it started to in 2008. But of course they had the bailouts. This time it's going to be the bail-ins. This time it's going to be rioting. This time they're going to have a very hard time controlling the situation. Now, we talked about in our other reports about the federal program called Chokehold, where the FDIC steps in, they look at the situation, and if it's not a business model they agree upon, they kind of cut off Visa, MasterCard, and they don't allow the business to do business. And of course, this is just the government going out there saying, we don't like what you're doing, so we're just cutting you off. And we understand why they're doing this. And they're doing this to a lot of gun sellers because we realize the government wants to remove the weapons from the people, because a society that has weapons is a society that can fight back. It's a society that can protect their rights. It's a society that can put the government in its place and say, no more, we will not do this, we will not follow along, you will not control us. A society that does not have weapons is a controllable society, and this is what they're trying to do. And throughout history, we see that this is a complete fact. Now, what's happening is the lawmakers on Capitol Hill are taking to the task that Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and its involvement with Operation Choke Point, the federal program that lets banks deny business to outlets that deal in guns and ammunition. They're trying to stop this because they're starting to realize is that how can the government just go and say, listen, we just don't like the business you're doing. They haven't broken any laws. They haven't done anything wrong. The government is just going out there saying, you know something? We don't like what you do. So we're not going to allow you to do business, to make a living. Critics of the program say it's an underhanded way of dinging the Second Amendment without having to go through Congress, because it hits at the lifeline of certain business perceived as unsavory by politicians in power. Specifically, opponents say the feds press financial institutions to obtain from dealing with gun companies, ammunition dealers, and the like, and in certain cases cut off their funding and access to services. Now, it's not just gun owners or ammunition owners. It is other businesses like casinos, porn sites, and things like that. But again, they haven't done anything wrong, and they decided that we don't like your type of business. Representative Sean Duffy, in fact, calls the program the greatest government overreach that no one is talking about. Our concern is you have agencies in the Obama administration that are using government as a weapon, and they are going after industries and people that they don't like, and this is exactly what is happening. Now, out in Japan, we've been talking about how the governor there decided that, you know what, I'm putting a stop to this military base in this region, and the United States wants this military base because it's larger, they can bring in more sophisticated weapons, and we can see they've been protesting, the people in Okinawa, against this. And right now, the governor of Okinawa pretty much ordered the construction of the base stopped completely. And this is going to be a problem because, as you know, the United States government, the central bankers, are trying to encircle China. They want to bring in more advanced weapons into this area. Now, out in Afghanistan, we understand that Obama promised us that all these troops are going to be leaving Afghanistan, and all of a sudden, he's confirmed that the planned drawdown of U.S. troops from Afghanistan has been suspended. And the multiple bases that they were closing, 2 of them are going to stay open, and they're looking at additional bases to stay open. How interesting. Because he was talking with President Ghani about the situation, and they decided that yes, in the best course of action, it would be better for the troops to remain in Afghanistan. And now you will see the buildup of troops once again. They're not going to be removing these troops. They're not going to give up Afghanistan. It's in a strategic location. They have huge amount of copper, lithium. Russia, China are in this country helping out. So again, there's no way they're leaving. And again, they have the poppy fields where they, produce opium. They sell it all over the world to pay for their secretive missions like the Islamic State. Now in Ukraine, what are we seeing? We're seeing that the Ukraine economy is completely falling apart. And what they're saying, the longer the Ukrainians try to implement the IMF recommendations, the more profound will be the crisis. This is coming from a Ukrainian official. They figured it out. They looked at Greece, they looked at Cyprus, they looked at France, and they said, you know something? If we do what they say, our economy is going to collapse completely. They're saying it is necessary to abandon the IMF recommendations, to raise salaries to a normal level, to form a normal market, and begin real tax reforms. He's saying if we do all of these things, it's going to fall apart. The IMF forecasts for Ukraine made in 2014 had failed to hold up. Really? The IMF has never made a forecast that actually came true. Actually, it was always the opposite. In 2014, the IMF, big analysis, calculated a forecast for Ukraine till the end of 2019. And under this forecast, the 2014 exchange rate of the US dollar was to be 9.46 hryvnia and under 10.7 hryvnia in 2015. Well, guess what? It isn't 9.46 or 10.75. It's 23.1 per 1 US dollar. Their other predictions have also never come true. The IMF, the central banking system, puts each one of these countries into a death spiral collapse. And everything they ask a country to do makes the situation worse. We see in Ukraine that the oligarchs who have their private armies are starting to question everything the government is doing. We might see a civil war inside Ukraine with oligarchs against the government, the southeastern people, and things might really go crazy in this country, where the United States government, the EU, cannot control anymore. And it seems like it's starting to build up that way. Monitors from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and a group of Russian journalists came under fire by Kiev-led forces. And of course, people are out there, no, Kiev is abiding by the Minsk agreement. They're not firing. But the OSCE has recorded about 80% of the violations came from Kiev. And we can see here is another indicator that, yes, Kiev is actually doing this, but they're not penalized. They're not punished. Drones of the Special Monitoring Mission, the SMM, to Ukraine of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe registered an episode of shelling of the settlement of Shirokino by Ukrainian troops. The SMM unarmed, unmanned aerial vehicle monitored both sides of the contact line in East Mariupol, and at 17:38 hours in Shirokino, the UAV observed outgoing mortar fire from Ukrainian armed forces positions. They were caught once again. Now that they have this monitoring, these drones, they're going to have these cameras, Kiev is going to be caught every single time. But again, the United States, Europe, they don't care. They want this to happen. They want war. Right now, the U.S. House has passed a resolution calling on President Obama to send lethal weapons to Ukraine. The non-binding resolution was approved by an overwhelming majority of about 348 to 48. And they're telling us that by sending these weapons, these lethal weapons, it doesn't mean the United States is going to go to war in Ukraine. They don't want our troops. Then why are troops over there? Why do we have advisors in there training Ukraine? Why do we have Americans fighting already? Seems like they're lying. And we know that as Ukraine gets lethal weapons, that means the war is on. That means the United States will eventually get involved. NATO will get involved. Because once the U.S. advisors get fired upon, the UK advisors get fired upon, the Polish advisors get fired upon, the NATO advisors get fired upon, guess what? It becomes an all-out war. So yes, these lethal weapons will lead to war. I like when they tell us that none of this is ever going to lead to war, and actually it always does. By providing lethal weapons. No, that doesn't lead to war. Yes, it does. We see NATO. They're boosting their military presence in Eastern Europe. Russia is saying to the U.S. and to Europe, you need to get the nuclear weapons out of Europe. They're saying that all of this contradicts the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's completely against international law and the international agreement by holding joint nuclear training missions with NATO allies that don't possess these weapons. And they're asking the United States to remove them, but the United States doesn't want to remove them. They want them there. They're going to use them later on. Yes, they will eventually. When things don't go the United States government central bankers' way, they will use nuclear weapons. You have to remember, they have the bunkers. They're ready to hide underground. They're ready to come out later on and restart the system. And if they have to use nuclear weapons, they will. We see that Israel is spying on the talks between the United States and Iran. Israel spied on the world power nuclear talks with Iran and was using the obtained information to urge the U.S. lawmakers' opposition against a nuclear deal with Tehran. So we can see right now, Congress basically works for Israel, and then we have Obama. So is anyone working for the people? It doesn't look like it. And if nobody's working for the United States people, we need to get rid of the government. Because their first order of business is to the people, not to another government. Period. The end. And if they cannot do this, you need to be removed. Now, we talked about how the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States of America, is the proxy army of Israel, UK. And we know that everything that they're doing is propaganda. I mean, yesterday we mentioned how they got the 100 U.S. military members, and I said it's a complete propaganda. Now Ashton Carter is out there saying, oh, well, wait a minute. They didn't actually break into our systems. They actually picked up all their names on the internet, which was free and available to everybody. And like I said, if you notice, all these cyber attacks, it's always surface information. Information you can get anywhere, just by doing a search on Google. They didn't break into anywhere. You have to remember, there's cyber legislation pending in the Congress. They want this passed, and they want people to believe that Russia, China, North Korea, the Islamic State, Syria, they're all cyber attacking, and we need this cyber legislation passed. Well, if you really look at the situation and we look at what's really going on, it's all surface information. There's nothing real, nothing of substance that they've really put out there. What, names, addresses, phone numbers? I can find that in 2 seconds on millions of people. There's nothing of anything that's reporting to a cyber attack. This is all propaganda to push their legislation through. It's all for the corporations. It's all for the U.S. government to spy on the American people. That's it. That's all it is. And to take control of the internet. Now, yesterday we talked about the exercise Jade Helm, and we see they've added 2 more states. Florida and Mississippi have added exercises to their states that will include surgical strikes and extractions. And again, we see that they are preparing for a major collapse scenario. And this is why we see all this going on at this point. And for those people who are getting prepared, continually prepare yourself. Weapons, medical supplies, ammunition. Keep cash around. Keep gold and silver. Make sure you have toiletries, extra medicines. And this is a great time period because you have the ability and you have the time right now to supply and continually supply this and rotate your equipment out. To be prepared, because you don't want to wake up one morning like the Cypriots and say, oh my God, what just happened here? Because it will happen in a snap of a finger. And those people who are not prepared will be running to the supermarket, running around trying to get all of this. At that time, it will be too late. It will be mayhem. And this is why you need to do this to protect your family. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.